I may sing. I may not. So I'm going to give you the secret to success in Hollywood. I know that that's what you came out for. It's all about the segue. And the segue is a transition between small talk and the pitch, which is what Hollywood is based on. The idea that you're going to walk into an office and tell somebody a story. And the segue is critical because any awkwardness that you have with these executives makes them start to feel nervous and maybe like you weren't a good choice in the first place. And so if this was a pitch, this reading, this book, I'd segue maybe by telling you a story about my daughter who's 4 and still says on accident instead of by accident. And I'd say how when my wife was pregnant and I started to wonder what kind of person my daughter would be and what kind of father I'd be. And since nobody sets out to be a bad parent, I found myself wondering, well, what if you are one and you don't know it? Or more simply, what if our best isn't good enough? And then as it happens with me, I started to think about what kind of story I could tell that would let me explore these questions. You see what I did there? That's called a segue. Paul Allen is a doctor. He's on his second marriage. He has a son with his first wife, and his son's in college. His name's Daniel. And Paul's got 2 young kids with his second wife, and they live in Connecticut. He commutes into the city. He rides the train home every night and walks past the white picket fences. And he's reached a point in his life where he's content, you know. He had the bad first marriage. He figured out the kind of woman that he should marry. He married that kind of woman. They had children. And tonight is pizza night, and Fran and the kids are making pizza when Paul gets home, and Jeopardy's on the TV, and they're, you know, they're doing that family thing, that ritual of dinner time. And Paul has a drink, and he jumps in, and then at a certain moment, they realize that Jeopardy is no longer on the television. On TV, the game show was interrupted by a newscaster. Banner headlines, crisis colors. None of us noticed at first. We were deep in the ritual of pizza. The dough was rolled, the cheese and sauce applied. Children were scolded for an overly liberal application of toppings. I'm no structural engineer, I told them, but nothing round can hold up under that kind of weight. Fran was the first to notice. She turned on the television, and instead of toothy hosts and eager guests, found shaky camera footage of some kind of rally. "What's this?" she said. We turned to look. On screen were images of a political event in Los Angeles. We saw pictures of a crowd, red, white, and blue banners hung on the walls. A presidential candidate stood on stage making a speech. As we watched, the politician flinched, staggered back. Behind him, 2 Secret Service agents pulled their weapons. "Volume," said Fran. "Where's the remote?" I asked, searching around. When we finally got the volume working, we heard the newscaster say, "Reports of at least 2 shots fired by an unknown gunman. Seagram was taken to the hospital nearby. No report yet as to the extent of his injuries." On screen, the footage played again, the candidate on stage, the sounds of shots fired from the crowd. This time the frames played slower, the camera pushing in. "We are trying to find a better angle," said the newscaster. On stage, the senator stumbled. The cameraman turned, and for a split second we saw the gun elevated above the crowd. The gunman was wearing a white button-down shirt. His face was blurred by motion and chaos. People were screaming in the background, running. "Who does he look like?" said Fran. "An actor, maybe? Do you ever get that feeling you've seen people before?" I got closer to the TV, but rather than make things clearer, it made them harder to identify. "We are getting word," said the anchor, "that the police have identified the gunman." The doorbell rang. Fran and I looked at each other. I reviewed in my head all the disasters of my life, the death of my father, a car crash in high school that required 3 separate surgeries, the demise of my first marriage. I weighed them against one another. It was a warm spring night, and I was a man who had found contentment in life, happiness. A lucky man who had come to expect good things. I wiped my hands on my napkin and moved toward the hall. There were 2 men in suits at the door, several others on the lawn. I saw a series of SUVs parked at the curb. "Paul Allen," said one of the men. "I'm Agent Moyers. This is Agent Green. We're with the Secret Service. We need you to come with us." The image I was seeing didn't make sense, the words he spoke. "I'm sorry," I said. "Do you have the right house?" Fran crept up behind me and stood wide-eyed in the foyer. She had taken the Bluetooth from her ear. "They're saying it's Daniel," she said. "The TV, they're saying he did it." "Mr. Allen," said the Secret Service agent, "we need you to come with us." I felt like a boxer who had taken an uppercut he never saw. "Let me get my coat," I said. I walked back into the kitchen, each step taking as if through water. On television I saw photos of my son. This is the speed of the world. Before you can think, an action has occurred. It had been less than an hour since the shooting. Where had they gotten a photograph? It was one I didn't recognize. Daniel stood on a wide lawn in a sweatshirt and jeans. He was squinting against the sunlight, one hand raised to shield his eyes. He looked maybe 18. A college photo, maybe. I remember the day I dropped him off at Vassar, a skinny kid with all his belongings in a footlocker, a boy who tried to grow a mustache at 14, but ended up with only a few whiskers on each side of his mouth like a cat. "What have you done?" I thought, but even as I thought it, I didn't know if the question was meant for Daniel or me.